Alright, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the Road to 18 Inch Arms. A few interesting topics today, as you can probably tell from whatever I title this video, but I'll get to that portion in a couple minutes, but I think first it's important to get into a bit of a story of just my mindset throughout my lifting career, from before I started to when I started to now, and kind of how my mindset has changed throughout. So when I first started lifting, I was kind of just filled with optimism. I was coming from a sport. I was a hockey player first, and I ended up quitting hockey so I could pursue lifting. There were a few other factors in that decision as well, but ultimately I decided that I did prefer lifting to hockey, and I wanted to pursue this and let this take me wherever it takes me. And ultimately, I think the decision paid off, but that's kind of besides the point. When I first started lifting, it was difficult to go from a sport in hockey where it's all revolved around quick decision making that has an immediate impact on the game. In lifting, your decision making is more in a mid to long term approach. So it doesn't necessarily matter in the short term what you do. Like if you mess something up bad for a week or a day, or even a couple weeks of training, you don't really know. And that can lead a lot of people to kind of feel like they're a little bit out of control, or not out of control, that's probably not the right way to say it, but it gives them a lack of control. And for, I think, a lot of guys in particular, we like to be in control of what we're doing and know the outcomes. We like to be analytical. We love numbers and stuff like that. And I think this is kind of a reason why so many of us get caught up in progressive overload and hyper analyzing that to an extreme. And ultimately, I think that the one thing that is in your control is your mindset. It is your optimism and what you see as your potential in lifting. So when I was a new lifter and I was about to start, and in my first few months, first year, maybe 2 years of lifting, before I really immersed myself into the fitness industry and started questioning things like natural or not, genetics, all this kind of stuff, I was just filled with optimism, and I believed everyone was natural to a reasonable degree. And of course, I wasn't always right. There were a few fake natty types that are very obvious looking back that I did believe were natural. But ultimately, I think my optimism and my motivation and just my drive to get to the gym was at its peak at that point, because I thought anything was possible. And ultimately, that led me to have pretty good results when I first started off lifting. And as you spend time in the fitness industry, it's easy to be consumed by a community that is afraid to take control of their results, and they're constantly talking about factors that are outside of their control. So things like genetics, PEDs, things like this. It took a pretty big turn in the industry around that time when I started to question things myself, when I was running into that like intermediate type plateau. So this is around probably 2018, 2019, 2020, when I'm not going to name anybody, but we all probably know who I'm talking about. A certain YouTuber that's just obsessed with genetics and PEDs. This whole thing was just so big, and this is right around that time I was kind of stuck in that intermediate plateau. As you guys know, when I was in quite a bit of my power building phase after spending a couple productive years in mostly just bodybuilding. This is where my mindset started to turn, and it started to become a little bit more difficult to want to lift to my fullest extent and give an all-out effort in the gym, because I felt a lack of control. I felt like everything was predetermined by my genetics, and I was just there to lift, and whatever happens, happens. And it takes away that tiny little sense of control that you feel you have when you first start lifting and turns it into nothing. And it takes away that optimism. And this experience could just be unique to me, but I think it's useful to share, because I ended up figuring out that somebody posted me on the, is it Natty or Juice, I think it's called, on Reddit. And it was actually, it didn't get that much traction. There were hardly any comments on it or anything, but there was a fair amount of comments basically it's like being certain that I was on gear. And I just thought that was kind of funny to look back. It just took me back into that mindset of nothing's possible, everything's outside of your control. Anyone that's relatively impressive is on gear. And the funny thing about all of this is the pictures that whoever posted it used are from when I was like way less advanced in the gym. They took a couple a couple pictures after I'd been lifting for a few years and had some progress, but I think two of the pictures, one of them I was 19 and the other one I think I was in high school. It's like, it's so funny to see that there's still people in that mindset, and it's so hard to help people like that. It really is. But I think the best thing you can do if you're in that situation is just immerse yourself in the natural community, spend time getting opinions from people like myself. And I'm not saying this to plug my own channel. You can go follow anyone's channel as long as they're natural. And just the biggest thing you'll realize is any productive, successful natural lifter, they can talk the talk all they want, but they always walk the walk every single time. You're never going to run into a big, jacked natural lifter that doesn't know what he's doing. It's very rare. And that's sums up my channel, I think, is that I can talk the talk and I can say, oh, I want 18-inch arms, and I can post all these crazy physique updates and whatnot, but I can also put out hundreds of videos going in depth of my training methods and my analysis and my approach to training, to where some people would say it's overkill and I'm overthinking and they think I'm crazy. And yeah, I probably am a little bit crazy with training, but I think it also kind of backs up that I am natural, because I do take this stuff incredibly seriously, and I'm not just, oh, it's outside of my control, just lift and see what happens and my genetics determine the rest. It's like, no, I kind of take it a step further, and I'm not just talking about myself here. This is basically the same exact case for any natural lifter. I'm just using myself for an example because we're on my channel. So it was kind of funny to see those comments, and ultimately I hope those people that think I'm not natural end up figuring out that there are people like me that exist that actually are natural, instead of just looking at the end product of a crazy amount of not only just time at the gym, but time spent thinking and coming up with methods and experimenting with training to a degree that most of these people haven't even scratched the surface of yet. So I wish luck to all those people, and I hope they figure out how far you can go naturally and they kind of get that mindset back. So what I'm trying to say here is, ultimately, don't overcorrect when you do run into your first plateau in lifting. It's easy to reach the intermediate stage and all of a sudden that whatever style you prefer of training doesn't really work that well anymore, and you have to be a bit more precise. It's easy to kind of just do what you want when you're a beginner to make your first little bit of gains, a little bit of progress, and you can kind of get away with whatever in some cases. That's absolutely not true across the board, but for some people you can get away with that. And then you do have to dial things in a bit more. The problem here is when you're in that newbie phase, you're overly optimistic, and you might be a little bit delusional, but that's just because you don't have experience yet. However, when you make it to that intermediate phase and the gains kind of take a turn for the worse and they slow down a little bit, this isn't the time to overcorrect. This is just a bit of a reality check, and the reality is you're still going to make great progress. It's just going to be a bit slower. But it's not that you're at your genetic limit, or genetics are the most important thing, or everyone else is on gear. Just keep lifting and keep going through it. Just keep that same optimism, but maybe just to a slightly lesser degree. Don't let yourself become delusional like a lot of us are when we first start and we believe everybody's natural. But I'd argue it's worse to overcorrect. The last thing you want to do is question everything, start to believe all the big jacked guys are on gear, there's no such thing as a big natural, because that's arguably more delusional, and at the same time, that is the most counterproductive mindset you can possibly have. It's going to lead you to cutting corners, potentially just not going to the gym entirely because you no longer believe much is possible and you're not making progress. But as someone that's made it through both of those phases of training, I would say the gains will always be there. I'm yet to run into a limit of any sort. Who knows? Maybe there is a natural limit. Again, this video is not really to debate that, but you can keep making progress. Just stay level-headed, keep going on, learn as much as you possibly can about training, train as hard as you possibly can, and try and prove the doubt that you have wrong, and you will be good, I promise. Just keep going through it, keep making progress, and as long as you're showing signs of progress in some way, you have no reason to think that you're at some form of limit.